threw that pigeon out and had 7 peregrines come in to get my pigeon. This was when everybody was, Silent Spring and all that stuff was going on. And they not only, I believe they were all first-year birds, and they were trying to knock each other off the pigeon so they could get on it. So they had this little bar fight going on at the side of the road. People are driving by, didn't see a thing. You know how that is. And I'm waiting there, sweating bullets.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast. And I'm going to start off like I always do and give a quick shout out to the people that help make this podcast possible, being Yaga Crafts out of Poland. If you haven't had a chance to order or check out any of his really awesome equipment yet, I highly recommend you do so. I'm sure you've heard me brag about it many times over now here on the podcast, but if you're in the market for any new anklets or hybrid jesses or even a custom glove, definitely hit him up. And after talking to him and meeting him at the NAFA meet this past week, he agreed to run a special promotion through the end of December. Although it may still be a little bit of a wait before you get your equipment, if you order during the month of December after hearing this podcast, send him a message with your order details, and also in your details there with the order, make sure that you put that you heard about this ad for free shipping through the podcast. And through the month of December, for any orders that are placed, if you mention that you heard this ad on the Falconry Told podcast, he's actually going to throw in free shipping with your order. So even if you don't need anything right now, it might be a good idea to go ahead and order something else, that gets you a little bit extra savings. Because, as some of you know, shipping from across the pond can kind of add up at times. So even if you don't need something right now or you can afford to wait on something, it's probably worth going ahead and putting in an order through the month of December after you hear this podcast and hear about this promo, because, like I said, you'll save yourself a little bit extra money. So hit him up, get his contact info from our website at falconrytold.com, or send him a message at Yaga Goshawk on Instagram. And like I said, be sure to mention this promo here on the podcast that you heard it, so you get some free shipping through the month of December. And I also have to give a quick thank you to Seth Roy of North Mountain Goshawks. And if any of you are in the market for a new hunting partner for next season, especially if it might be a parent-reared goshawk, definitely hit him up. And he produces some really nice game hawks. So if you get on the list and put in an order with him, I'm sure you won't regret your choice. Definitely tell him that we sent you. He, like I said, produces some really nice birds. I've gotten a chance to see some of them fly, and not a single person that I know that has had one of his birds has been disappointed. So I'm sure you won't be either. So hit him up, tell him we sent you. Fill out that form on northmountaingoshawks.com or send him a message on Facebook, either way, and I'm sure you'll be happy with your choice. Okay, well, this episode was recorded back in the summer while I was visiting Seth Roy along with some of the guys from New Jersey, and this was kind of recorded in between doing some of the Dachshund episodes and things like that. But while I was at Seth's, he also had some other Falconers over, including our guest for this episode, Gaylen Gerrish. And this episode was really cool to do because Gaylen is another one of the Falconers that comes from the much older generation that was practicing falconry before there was lots of rules and regulations, and before falconry was practiced more prevalently across the country and stuff. So he has a really cool perspective on things, and he also talks a lot about some of his early practices in equipment making and hood making and different things like that. And like I said, just a really fascinating guy to talk to. So I'm sure you all will enjoy this episode, and we're just going to jump right into this episode here with Gaylen Gerrish. So here we go.
Go back to when I got into falconry. There was nobody in falconry then.
Yeah.
Just some of the old, those few names that you heard, that was them. Mm-hmm. And maybe a couple of young kids tagging along to try to learn the sport. But falconers were few and far between back then. I think when I joined the NAFA, I guess I was a charter member of that. It was like, I think I was member 103.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Something like
Yeah.
that.
So you were in it from the early days, and
From the beginning, yes.
And so
Yeah.
I'm assuming then you're one of these Falconers too that started before a lot of the rules and regs and everything.
Oh,
kinda
way
came.
before.
Yeah, way before all
Way
that.
before, yeah. When I lived in Florida, they had a director of what they called the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. It's a long name, but it included, pretty everything except saltwater fishing. But anyway, the director of that, Earl Fry, was a falconer. And that made it good. So he had a little permit system of his own, and nothing fancy. It was just almost word of mouth, is this fella capable of being a falconer or not? And you would get a little permit for... So he always limited people to 2 peregrines. He didn't limit you to anything else, but he limited you to 2 peregrines. So
That's funny.
it goes way back.
So you lived in Florida earlier on then, before you lived in this area in Pennsylvania then?
Yeah. I was born in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I actually got interested in falconry in New Jersey. This was about 1957. And I remember looking for hawk nests then. Now, whether, you call that part of falconry or not, I don't know. But I think we moved to Florida then in 57, 58. Mm-hmm. And I started up falconry down there. And in Florida, in the winter, every kestrel in North America ends up in Florida, in the Florida Peninsula. There's like one on every other telephone pole. And so lots of good beginner birds. Mm-hmm. And I had my first kestrel in 1960. And it was actually a bird that I lost and recovered. So... had that bird for quite a while, and there were just so many kestrels. Boy, I really cut my teeth on American kestrels.
They're a great bird.
They are.
They're still to this day my favorite bird.
Yeah. They're a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. We have. It was so hot. This was southeast Florida, and it was so hot that there were very few nesting raptors. Just a very few red tails, a lot more red-shouldered hawks, but there wasn't too much to work with back then. Mm-hmm. You had to wait for migration, and when migration hit, it was a whole new ball game. And it was a good supply of birds, and I was never without a bird. Always had a bird. I think I had my first peregrine in 63 or 64. It was a tundra peregrine, and fell in love with him. As soon as I flew that first bird, I saw the essence of falconry. I saw why falconry had developed the way it had over the centuries, and I contribute that to the peregrine. Peregrines just fall right into place in what you're trying to get done in falconry. So I'm a big peregrine man.
Still to this day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much predominantly what you're still flying to this day then?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I just quit flying birds. I can still catch them, I can still train them, but I can't keep up with them. My knees are just shot from all those years of pounding the pastures.
Yeah, I bet. Well, going back to Florida then, though, I mean, whenever you had all these dealings with kestrels in Florida, I mean, what were you hunting with them? What kind of falconry were you doing with the kestrels then when you started out?
Anything they would catch.
Okay.
Anything from a grasshopper to a mouse to a dicky bird. Whatever presented itself. Mm-hmm. I remember one bird I had flying free in 3 days, and that was a wonderful bird. That one was would chase everything. but kestrels being, a little on the, kestrels aren't merlins. They're a little tougher to get going. But I had a lot of fun with that breed. We didn't get too many accipiters down there. I wasn't into accipiters at first. I was into long wings, and I flew them right up until the federal government said you can't do it anymore, which was kind of a crazy thing because we were seeing peregrines coming down the Florida coast. I mean, it was like, flies around.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of varying, just viewpoints on a lot of that too. I mean, you mentioned that you saw a ton of them. You didn't really see like a decrease. And I'm sure that it was kind of dependent on different like circumstances in different areas and stuff. But I know there's a lot of guys that have kind of the opinion that it wasn't like peregrines as a whole, but it was more just the particular anatom subspecies and so on and so forth. I mean, I definitely wasn't around at that point in time. I just know what a lot of different guys have said. And I mean, so you pretty much from what you saw then, there really wasn't, a shortage that you saw.
The Thunderbirds were still reproducing and coming down. When I caught my first peregrine, I had 7 peregrines trying to get my pigeon. So that was my start with the peregrines, so you can imagine. But you're right, the anatom peregrine is the one that really took the hit. And there were a lot of things going against the anatom peregrine. There's, when they have a nice cliff face over a river, like we have in Pennsylvania, and then they put a scenic overlook over the thing. Peregrines don't put up with that. They don't care if a train is going past them underneath, but they won't put up with things above them. So a lot of our cliffs in Pennsylvania got deserted. They just left and didn't come back. There was a time when Jim Rice and them were actually checking railroad cuts. There were so many peregrines around. They were checking railroad cuts to see if they were nesting on them, where they had a man-made cliff face, not too big either. So, but there were just a ton of things. And of course, that was just before I got in on all this. Egg collecting had been a big thing. The early 1900s, the egg collectors just loved peregrine eggs. They thought they were the greatest thing in the world. Well, falconers wanted peregrine iases. They didn't want peregrine eggs.
Right.
So there was this battle going on where the falconers would climb down when there were eggs in the eyrie and mark them up with India ink. No magic markers back then. It was all India ink if you want something to really hold. And so that they wouldn't be attractive to egg collectors. So then the egg collectors would climb down and throw those eggs out of the nest to see if the birds would recycle. And now, isn't this a scenario to, it was, so the anatom peregrine everywhere took a hit. I don't think they got wiped out. I had an anatom peregrine back in, I guess, right around 1970. And obviously, an anatom peregrine, big, beautiful, dark birds, just, and so I think there were a few around, but all the sites where they were obviously nesting, the most obvious places, they were gone. People were just giving them too much grief. They just would not leave them alone. And boy, if you want to mess up a wildlife population, mess it up during its breeding cycle. That's when you can really do some damage. That's when you need to leave them alone.
Yeah.
And coming from Florida, where I was trapping migrant hawks, I didn't get into this IS thing. So I've always been a passage man. I like passage birds. I like, they're beyond the stupidity of an IS, but they're not so cocksure of themselves as a haggard. They're in that in-between thing where they're willing to bend a little to get along with the falconer.
Sure.
So I've always had passage birds. Even when I had to get ISs, I'd wait till they left the nest and trap them then. Pretty easy to trap then, actually, if you're paying attention. But rather than climbing up and disturbing a nest and getting a bird that has no idea what to do next, about as close as I came to taking ISs was soarhawk. I call them soarhawks. Mm-hmm. Out of the nest, but haven't migrated yet. That in-between time lasts about 4 to 6 weeks.
Sure. So. Yeah, and as far as whenever you were young and getting into this, and I mean, so about, I'm sorry, how old were you again whenever you first kind of took an interest into all this?
I think I was 14.
14. And what was the thing then that kind of got you interested in it? Like, how did you find out about it? And
every once in a while, you would see a magazine article on it. And unfortunately, they were in what we used to call men's magazines, Great White Hunter type magazines. And so they'd always dramatize it. So what you were reading was all the, all the real flashy stuff. But I thought to myself, now my dad was not a hunter. I wasn't a hunter. I didn't have a gun. My dad didn't have any guns. This came out of the blue. But I thought, what a great way to hunt, where the game has a fair chance. You don't leave any cripples behind, and you're watching predation, in the rawest sense of the word, which is mostly what nature is all about: eat and be eaten. So I thought this is a great thing to get into. To train a hawk and work with it while it was hunting. And
so, I mean, whenever you were messing with all these kestrels and stuff, then you were still, a teenager, and I mean, so at what point then was it that you ended up moving and relocating from Florida then?
Well, I went to college out west.
Okay.
And that was an entirely different way of doing things in the falconry world. I actually went out to Utah. I went to Utah State University for forestry and wildlife.
Okay, yeah.
And we had 7 falconers that roomed together. Sometimes that was a good thing. Sometimes it was not such a good thing.
I can imagine.
Especially in those days, falconers were a lot more cutthroat with each other than they are now. The way information has become much more available now, there's not the need to be cutthroat. But back then, it could get pretty heated sometimes. So I went out west. Now that was entirely different. Down in Florida, longwings, they practically lived on air. They didn't need anything, for body heat. Northern Utah winters were another story. And at that time, the peregrine had been eliminated as a potential species we could use. So it was prairie falcons. Mm-hmm. Well, there they were, lots of prairie falcons around, and I really got a I really got an education from prairie falcons. They aren't peregrines.
No, they're not.
Those sweet, lovable peregrines that always do the right thing, they were a lot different than prairie falcons that didn't care whether you lived or died.
Yeah, I mean, so you were sticking to passage still, and you weren't really imprinting the prairies. You're just sticking to the passage. Yeah.
No, for the fun of it, we'd go out and find their eyries on the little cliffs. But I think only once did I take an eyas prairie. So I'd go out and trap the passage birds, and that was a lot of fun. That might have been more fun than hunting with them because they hadn't wound their magic on you, when you were just trapping them. But they were tough customers.
Yeah, they can be. And yeah, I mean, the only experience that I have with the prairie is the one male or the one tiercel that I tried imprinting, a handful of years ago. And yeah, I mean, I've heard from so many people that, of course, the passage birds can be, quite the challenge. They got an attitude, and and I can totally see it. I mean, the male imprint that I had, he was pretty cool, but of course, he was an imprint.
Yeah.
But I mean, what were you trying to hunt with them out there?
Pheasants.
Pheasant.
I wasn't trying. I was doing great.
Yeah.
This was back in the time that you were wading through pheasants in northern Utah. I mean, when I was out there, it was South Dakota had nothing on northern Utah as far as pheasants go. You could hunt them, you just knew that if you jumped in your car and drove for 15, 20 minutes, you were going to be into pheasant.
That's one of the hardest things for me in having a lot of these conversations, and especially with guys that have been in it for as long as you have. That is one of the hardest things to hear, is to hear about just how things used to be with the amount of land available, the amount of game available. And it makes me kind of envious. I'm sure it makes a lot of current generation falconers envious, just with how much game and land there was available.
A lot of falconers are going to smaller hawks. Mm-hmm. I think they call it micro falconry or something now. Sure. Just because it's more compressed, the whole thing. You don't need as much land. You don't need big game animals and birds to hunt. You can hunt small stuff all day long. But yes, back then, Pennsylvania had a really robust pheasant population just before I got here. And it's funny about those pheasants, or really any population. You dump them in a habitat, and at first they have no predators. The predators aren't wise to them. They don't know they're good to eat, and they flourish. But then that changes and goes the other way. Just like all wildlife, it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. But the pheasants in Pennsylvania are wild pheasants, stock that became wild are a thing of the past. In Utah, it's a thing of the past. I guess they're hanging in there in the Dakotas. But that was just a heyday things just, clicked, and you just had to know enough to capitalize on it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've heard so many stories, from guys and from all these different states that just talked about the quote unquote glory days, and just how much everything ranging from pheasants to, in some places, like prairie chickens, all these different, especially feathered game, where they just used to be so plentiful. Hell, even ducks, the amount of places where they could hunt ducks.
Grouse.
Especially sage grouse too. And yeah, it is what it is. Times are what they are now. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more people now that are adopting the micro falconry because, well, I mean, there's only 100 zillion starlings and house sparrows around. They're never going away.
Yeah, right.
You drop a nuclear bomb on most parts in most places, they're going to survive along with turtles and cockroaches, probably. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. It's rough. I mean, it is sad. I'm sure from your perspective and guys that are in kind of like your position, I know you're not really super active in falconry anymore, but I'm sure it's got to be tough, over time, seeing all these different changes and seeing just
definitely,
I mean, talk a little bit about that. I mean, over the years, I mean, I'm sure that it's been tough for you, like just seeing this decline.
Yep. And there's, I go back to the days where if there wasn't a specific regulation protecting an animal, you could hunt it. And nowadays, it's like everything's protected, and they pick out a couple of things that, they let you hunt. So it was a smorgasbord before as compared to now. I used to do a lot of heron hawking with my peregrines. And, you'd occasionally catch, a limpkin or a golden slippers or something like that. But it wasn't a big deal. Mostly hunting cattle egrets. Did catch a great blue heron once, which almost killed me.
And stab you through the heart almost?
No, aiming for my eyeballs. So I used to do a lot of that, but back then the game laws just weren't so stringent as they are now. You really have to work harder at finding a continuing supply of game for your hawk, unless you're going to turn your hawk into a pet or something. It's hard work anymore. It didn't used to be.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I know it would be very tough for me to live through that. And then, well, I mean, even now, I mean, I can only speak from my personal experience now. I mean, I got into this in like 2015. And I mean, even since then, I mentioned this before, I mean, every season, it seems like we lose at least one, maybe two really decent hunting spots. Fields that were just loaded with rabbits or whatever. Now they're, a suburb, freaking housing complex, whatever, the apartment complex, whatever. And, it's sad to see. I mean, it's going to be tough thinking about how the next handful of decades are going to go. I mean, assuming I live that long, of course. but yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I hate thinking about that.
Well, I was lucky because in Florida, I had lots of hunting grounds. Everybody wanted to live on the beach on the coast.
Yeah.
So right in from that were mostly orange groves. And in from that towards Lake Okeechobee was cattle ranching. Mm-hmm. And essentially just open land as far as you can see. Sometimes not a tree in sight. And then also in Utah, in northern Utah, there was, well, so much of Utah is federal land anyway. But you just, the big boom hadn't hit yet as far as, used to be fields and now it's houses. Mm-hmm. But when I came to Pennsylvania, I could see it. The crowded Northeast is a good way to describe Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey. It's really quite crowded compared to other parts of the country. So coming up here, it was a lot more difficult to keep everything going, finding hunting grounds. And birds are plentiful enough, but you could always get birds. I had, like I say, I'm a passage man, and I would get a new passage bird every year. That's just the way I did it. I had even dates when I would release birds if I, had them that long. But all this goes back to pre-telemetry days. There was no telemetry for,
Yeah.
you hunted peregrines a lot different than they do now. Seth has one of these GPS
Yeah,
trackers.
right. Yeah, I have GPS too. No, it's
That's wonderful, but try it without any of that stuff.
No, thank you. No, thank you. I hear all the stories. Like, when we flew Falcons, all we had back in the day was like a bell, no, thank you. I mean, once you have it, it's almost an indispensable tool. And talking to guys like yourself that we're talking about, even whenever just traditional beeping telemetry was like revolutionary. I mean, I still don't even think I would want to fly a bigger long wing, even just normal standard, beep telemetry. I mean, once you got the GPS, especially with the long wing, man, it's a night and day difference. But I'm sure, I'm sure that your experiences with some of these peregrines and things. I mean, you're probably flying a new bird every year, kind of just by default anyway.
Right, exactly. There wasn't that feeling. Oh, I want to keep this bird forever.
Yeah, bye bye.
I got that. I get the old beepers, that kind of telemetry. But I'll tell you the funny thing. I had flown birds for so long that I got telemetry when I came to Pennsylvania, and half the time I'd forget to take the telemetry along. It just wasn't part of the repertoire, So, and I was so used to flying birds a certain way that, worst case scenarios weren't likely to happen. That was just part of it at the time.
Yeah,
but I never got into this mapping type telemetry.
Yeah.
I suppose, I had Ger peregrines, but I never had a Ger falcon. And I always wanted a Scottish peregrine, never had one of them. A few other birds like that. Maybe if I had gotten birds like that, I might have said, boy, I better get this mapping thing for it.
Well, yeah, if you're just trapping passage birds each year, and theoretically you're not having to sink thousands of dollars into each new bird that you're getting, yes, there's an extra little incentive to make sure that you can. Yeah. Well, I'm sure flying them that way, though. I'm sure you probably, the ones that you didn't automatically by default have to turn back to the wild. I'm sure you probably, it's so easy to lose a long wing that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were you a big fan then of the old style of how to track birds then? And, just the rudimentary stuff.
Yeah.
And watching. Yeah. That pretty much how you track your birds.
Yeah. And you just kept a closer handle on them. Mm-hmm. You just nowadays, geez, guys are letting their birds fly out to dot in the sky and still going. To us, that was a lost bird. Mm-hmm. But they, we did that, and there were just a lot of things you did differently so that you could hang on to your bird. But I didn't worry about it. If I hadn't lost my peregrine or Merlin by the 1st of April, they were gone. I cut them loose. The Goshawks, 1st of March, that was the date. And that put them back in the breeding cycle. And part of falconry should be getting a bird through, to where it can, be a part of nature again. Sharp-shinned hawks, January 1st, believe it or not, you just don't want to have a passage accipiter, a passage Sharpie out overnight in a Pennsylvania winter. That's not going to happen there. So no. I used to trap them. I haven't had a Sharpie for a while, but I used to trap them in September and fly them until 1st of January or the first break in the weather after the first of the year, because they just didn't do well in winter. A lot of guys would use lights and switch them over to molting in the winter and flying in the summer.
Reverse molt.
I guess they do it. I never did it.
Yeah.
But I always thought, I don't want to be catching mamas with a clutch of little babies, So,
well, I mean, unless you're hunting starlings and house sparrows.
Well, yeah. But when they're catching everything in sight, which Sharpies do.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Most accipiters in general. Yeah. I mean, they don't care what it is. They're going to try and catch it for sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome though. I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty wide breadth of, especially long wing experience in your early days. The
1980s, I concentrated on accipiters.
Okay.
I had my last peregrine for 7 years because I knew it was the last one. So I didn't turn that one loose. Mm-hmm. Eventually, that peregrine was killed by a red tail. Mm. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't even like to think of that.
It's pretty common, though.
Yeah. But in the 80s, I concentrated on accipiters, of which there are plenty in Pennsylvania. Sharpshins. This state is a stronghold for sharpshins.
So it was by the 80s then that you made your move to Pennsylvania then?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yes. All right.
And there were goshawks, a lot more then than there are now. They've got to come up with a goshawk that doesn't raise the roof when you get near their nest. If they just shut up, there'd be a lot more goshawks around, because I chased many a goshawk nest where somebody got to it first and, blew them to kingdom come. It became a lot more common once they started spring turkey hunting in Pennsylvania. And then, of course, they decided to restock fishers in Pennsylvania because they said there was too many porcupines, and why they thought fishers would limit themselves to porcupines, I don't know, but that was tough. That was tough on goshawks, but also tough on great horned owls, which in turn are tough on goshawks. Mm-hmm. So, but there was a nice supply of accipiters in Pennsylvania back in the 80s, and I just capitalized on it. I would trap as early as I can, but I had to go into winter trapping, a lot of times to get the kind of bird I was looking for. And so that was my accipiter experience, about 10 years there, and then just occasionally after that.
And, I mean, was it a big adjustment for you? Because, as everybody in falconry knows, I mean, the difference in those species are like night and day. Oh, yeah. I mean, what was that like for you?
Well, it's a different kind of falconry. Mm-hmm. It's more up close and personal falconry. There's the bird on your fist, not up in the sky, and like a longwing would be. And it was more like flash hunting. A lot of the success you had was just a flash, and there it is, and you're done. Yep. You didn't traipse around looking for duck ponds and setting everything up and all that like you would with a longwing. But the accipiters was just more up close and personal. I enjoyed it. I like accipiters, not as much as my longwings, but I do like accipiters.
Yeah. Well, and so whenever you were making that transition, then, I mean, what other kind of challenges did you have whenever you were trying to mold and learn like a completely new species, like going from, long wings to short wings. I mean, what kind of issues did you run into with that, and with the change of the mindset and how to approach those birds as opposed to, the peregrines and stuff?
Well, by that time I had built up a pretty extensive falconry library, and it was a working library. They weren't just stuck in the bookcase to look pretty. I was using them. I learned a lot from Frank Beebe. He wasn't everybody's friend, but I had met him and talked to him, and man had a lot of insights on falcons and accipiters, and I pretty much used what he told me to get the ball rolling on these hawks. But there were other really good falconers too. A lot of them, like you say, they specialize in accipiters or they specialize in long wings. And then you see these all-rounders sometimes that, have tried it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I just plowed right ahead, full speed ahead, right into it. And really feel lucky that I had as much success as I did doing that. Because I see some guys struggle. If they don't really understand the psychology of a hawk, what's going on between his ears, it can be a tough row to hoe. It can be tough. That they have. I see where some fellas who would be wonderful falconers, if they could just get the hang of it on what their hawk's trying to do.
Talking to some other guys before, I mean, there's some people that have some more of a textbook or tunnel vision type approach to, some of these different birds. And I really think that kind of hinders people sometimes. They kind of get in their own head too much with certain things and just don't take a step back and think about, things from that other point of view that they need to. But yeah, I mean, and every species isn't for everybody too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some people are just, their personalities fit certain species more than others. At least that's my personal belief anyway. But
down in Florida, every decent hummock has a red shoulder family in it. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's where I cut my teeth on Cooper's hawks. Those darn red shoulders, they've got the attitude and a lot of the tricks that Cooper's hawks pull. And there again, it's no big deal to get a nice red-shouldered hawk, but to trap a passage bird, or a soar hawk is they're tough customers, just like a Cooper's hawk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard they're a little bit more accipitrine and
they are,
and demeanor and stuff than a buteo, but.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to talk to you some too about some of the different aspects of falconry that I know that you kind of somewhat became, I don't know about known for per se, but like some of the different aspects that you kind of, that other people may know you for, which some of our mutual friends were talking about how, you're really good at hood making and equipment making. And I mean, what other some of these aspects of falconry did you become really passionate about then? And other than just the hawks or falcons themselves,
mm-hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
did you ever get into certain aspects of equipment making or anything that was
Sure.
Yeah.
Back when I started falconry, you essentially made your own equipment,
mm-hmm.
or you didn't have equipment. That's about what it boiled down to. So there was no such thing as getting out a credit card and buying equipment somewhere. So the whole schmeal, everything you would use, all the furniture in falconry, you had to make yourself. Well, that was fine. I was kind of talented in crafts and so forth. So I bailed right into that. And one of the things that I did was I'm a firm believer that every trained hawk should have a hood. Not everyone feels that way, but that's okay. But to me, every new hawk needed a new hood that fit them almost custom made. And going through passage birds, that meant a lot of hoods. So I started making hoods and so forth, and the little bit that you would talk to fellas on the falconry grapevine, that's all it was back then, just a falconry grapevine. Liked my equipment, and I started up a mail order business with falconry equipment. I called it the Falconhurst, after the Swiss Family Robinson thing. Put out a catalog. Thing took off way more than I wanted it to. Walt Disney was one of my customers, all kinds of fish and game departments. Nobody knew where to get equipment. And, here was this guy making equipment, putting out a catalog. So I started doing that, and that just builds up your expertise in making this, keeps you looking out for new and different things that, ways of making the equipment. And I did that for, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I'm not sure. And I started to think, wait a minute, I have a family here. And I'm up till 2 a.m. making hoods for a stranger. And I thought, this isn't what I had in mind. And my first thought was, I can help other falconers have good equipment for their birds. That was my original thought. But then the idea kind of creeped in. I'm making equipment for people I don't even know. And for all I know, they're the lousiest falconer in the world. They should not even have a hawk. And yet I'm supplying them equipment. So that thing kind of got me, worried about it. And I eventually quit doing that. But I kept up making a new hood for every bird. And I would make hoods for people I knew, or if somebody out of the blue said, hey, I hear you make good hoods. Can you make a hood for me? And I'd make hoods that way. And boy, I'll tell you, the number of hoods I made is up into 4 digits. A lot of hoods. I finally, I guess you're familiar with the Sliper cannon. No? Guy in England made a formula, and you take one measurement off the hawk, and you put it into this formula, and you end up with a hood pattern. And it was a bugger. It was really complicated. I said, it doesn't have to be this complicated. And I made up my own hood formula. And I got it down to 12 steps. And I actually published that in Hawk Chalk in 1999, I think it was. I had about 5 different hood patterns. I had formulas, not patterns, but formulas. Had one for Arab hoods. The one that I figured everyone would do best at would be Anglo-Indian hoods. And I had some dandies for that. People still use it. Amazing the number of people that use those hoods. And so that was kind of a big thing in falconry for me. And because I was making it public in Hawk Chalk, I felt like I was more presenting it to the people who, it ought to be presented to. So I noticed, way back, I think it was in the 1950s, Bob McCollum had made a spring wire brace. And, the braces they put on hawks, they're unique, they're clever, and they can be a real pain, too. And he made a spring wire closure, but it was very basic. And then Frank Beebe made one, and he went overboard and made it way too complicated. And so I said, well, we can do better than that. And I made up a pattern for a spring wire brace to put on the back of these hoods. It's scissor action. Some people in the early days called them safety pin braces. But anyway, I did that, and that worked like a dream. I actually started on that in the 70s, and I published it in Hawk Chalk in about the year 2000. So I gave it a real test. And there's a lot of fellows that like those too, because the hood just pops on and closes. And same for getting them off. There's not all this fiddling and putting your head up next to the hawk, and it's a new hawk, and he flips the hood off, and there you are, like the full moon right next to him. None of that stuff's going. It's all out here. So everybody liked that. I had some eagle guys that liked them too, because otherwise they have a heck of a time dropping the bird down far enough to get up to pull the braces. This, you don't do that. It's all out on the hand. So that was something that I did a lot of, equipment making. And for a while it was commercial for just a short while. And then after that it was just for myself, and put them on the raffle table at the meet and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and you said that, so I mean, you kind of just casually brushed over, like, Walt Disney and some guys like that being customer. I mean, I have to know what they ordered. Like what was some of the stuff that they got?
Well, everything. It was a complete catalog. I had everything. I had hoods, jesses, leashes.
So the guys like him ordered a little bit of everything then?
Yeah.
For what exactly? I mean, what size, what type of bird? And
well, I don't know what they were eventually going to use it for, but I assume in some of their films they wanted it for, whenever I would watch one of those movies, I'd see if it was one of my hoods.
Yeah.
But the other big thing was quite a number of fish and game departments needed some kind of raptor handling system, and they needed the equipment for that.
So out of all the types of equipment that you made, were hoods the thing that you got the most enjoyment out of? Or, I mean, I'm assuming you made probably gloves and all the other stuff too, right? And that's what you said. I mean, was hoods what you got the most satisfaction out of, or?
Certainly made more hoods than anything else.
Yeah.
Which is okay. That's all right. Because like I say, I believe a trained hawk should have a hood. Yeah. They're just so darn useful. Craziest thing in the world. Take this solitary bird in the wild that stays away from humans. Next thing, he's on the fist, and you have a leather cap on his head to blindfold him. What a difference! The psychology behind it is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some people call it an addiction or a problem or even a fetish. I call it practical. I I like having a lot of hoods, and I have a quite a few hoods. Yeah, I mean, you might have to come out of retirement and end up making me one. I'm not going to obligate you, but I'm going to strongly hint and encourage.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have one if it's if you still got it in the toolbox enough to make one for little old me over in Indiana. But
I think there's one out at the Archives.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've been to the Archives a couple times, and I'm.
And I'll tell you what was really neat. The fellow who runs the Falconry Museum at Volkswagen, Holland, wanted one of my hoods. And a fellow was going over that way and took a hood to him. So that's sitting somewhere in a glass case, I guess.
Okay. Well, I mean, if they've got one, then I have to have one too.
Oh, then okay. Well, that settles it.
Well, I mean, it should. I mean, I'm just as important as those guys.
Well, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. No, the archives are great, man. And I would love. I'm aware of the museum that you just mentioned. And there's different places that I've been to in Europe, and each time it's not it's so tempting to kind of just casually, just force an elbow through the display glass, and reach in and just fill your, bag or whatever with some of this vintage stuff. I was in, it was a handful of years ago. I went through the Hofburg, the Imperial Palace in Austria. And they have a music equipment museum and an arms and armory museum, both right next to each other. As I was totally nerding out. It's two of my favorite things, right? And man, like I was going through the arms and armament, it's like room after room after room after room, just, different sets of armor, swords, all this stuff. And then at the very end of it, they had a small falconry exhibit. They had some... I don't even know how old they had to have been, probably like hundreds of years old, but they had lures and some hoods and stuff. And I was just like, is it worth prison?
Yeah.
Is it, just trying to think about, man, like, could I get out of here quick enough?
If only those feathers would stay in good shape on those old hoods.
Man, yeah. I mean,
so you could see the beauty of those things.
For sure. I mean, my luck, I'd break the glass and then they would just disintegrate. And it'd be my luck. But
I've made many hoods with feather plumes. I like that.
Yeah.
In fact, I just went through them. I think I've got 16 different bags of feathers of all different colors, mostly hackles, but also some, guinea fowl feathers that just, I really like the looks of feathers. They're not practical, but they're certainly historical.
Yeah, I mean, those are the type of hoods that you just have to put in like one of those, like, I don't know, almost kind of like a glass, dome glass, like just display mini cases and just sit in there and you just, admire. I mean, the practicality of having those nice, like you were describing, like the pheasant feathers or whatever, like the decorative feathers on top and stuff, man, it's just like, I don't want like chick guts and everything else to get on this thing, man. I just want to be able to appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, there's actually more falconers than you might realize that keep hood collections of hoods made by different people.
Yeah, you're talking to one.
There you go. Okay. Well,
when I said other people, think I have a problem, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's practical.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're talking to one. I love collecting hoods.
Yeah. And under glass, they keep. They keep. You keep them out in the air, and the bugs want to get to the feathers and everything, and suddenly your beautiful hood could look like a rag doll. But and maybe that's why Turk's head knots got so popular. I mean, when I first saw Turk's head knots on Dutch hoods, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But yes, that's the thing for the utility of it, I guess.
So I've asked a couple of other hood makers that I've gotten the good fortune to meet. Like I've asked this question to like guys like Steve Housel and in the UK, and some other guys I know that have made like a career out of making hoods and stuff. I mean, how many hoods do you think that you had to go through before you felt like, okay, this is something that I really feel? I know you said that you pretty much you had to make equipment no matter what. I'm sure you were using hoods that you thought, because you didn't have a choice. Yeah. But I mean, like, how many hoods do you think you had to go through in retrospect before you really got these hoods that you felt like you could sell to other people or market or whatever and not have a second thought about it?
Well, the time span was probably 10 years.
Okay.
It's not as far as the hood, so much of it is the hood pattern and the type of leather you use. Got to be on the right track with both of those things, and then you'll probably end up with a decent hood. And I'll tell you, the hoods that I've used on my own birds, if I do an over and under stitch on the seam, even on a Dutch hood, if it fits that bird and bird's comfortable in it, I'm happy. I don't struggle with blind stitching unless I need to make a blind stitch hood. Glued seams are wonderful, wonderful things. Use the right glue. It's got to be the right glue. But you make a hood. I've had hoods, still have hoods that are 20 years old that can be plopped right on a hawk with glued seams.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I all that stuff is Greek to me. There's no way in hell I'll ever be able to probably consider myself even remotely capable of making them. And I don't know how many I would even have to make before, I would feel competent enough to really even use them. But yeah, I mean, I know you were selling equipment and making hoods for the better part of that 10-year, time span commercially and everything. But yeah, no, I was just curious because, I've heard different things from different guys, but I don't know how quickly some people take to it than others. Like how
exactly,
many,
Exactly. You can have two guys spend 10 years making hoods, and one guy is putting out masterpieces, and the other guy doesn't want to show you his hoods. So that's a big part of it too. The old all thumbs carpenter, type thing. Oh, that works too with hood making. If you keep at it, you're going to end up with some perfectly serviceable hoods.
Yeah. So in other words, the answer to the question is purely subjective, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough. Well, and what would you think you would still enjoy making to this day as opposed to other types of equipment?
All of it.
No preference.
No problem making any of it. I got to tell you, those hand-stitched gloves I used to make, that got pretty tedious. But the rest of it, I always made my own traps, tied my own dogazes. I just did it in the old sense of, there was a day when you couldn't get out the credit card, so that day just, it just kept going that way. You had to do it yourself. And the nice thing about it is, when you do it yourself, it ends up exactly the way you want it, or you have only yourself to blame. Now, like tying dogazes, nets. You could make them as wide as you want, as tall as you want, the size mesh that you want, the color thread you want, the thickness of the thread you want, and you get exactly what you want as opposed to chopping up a misnet somewhere. So there's a real benefit to doing that, even with hoods, which I can tell you're a real hood guy. You make a hood for, say, a peregrine tiercel. It might fit on my peregrine tiercel, but is it going to fit on the peregrine tiercel of the guy out on the West Coast?
Sure.
Or is he going to, end up? I always would tell guys, put it in the hood drawer and, save it for the next bird that fits, if it doesn't fit them, because it's going to fit something. But there again, when you do it yourself, it's going to turn out the way you want it to, or you scrap it and start over, and that one turns out the way you want it to. It just goes like that. And speaking of dogazes, I was a bander for about 60 years too. And banded down south, banded out west, banded up here in Pennsylvania. Another thing I had to give up, just got, too old and decrepit.
Yeah.
The place I used to trap in the fall in Pennsylvania, we got beautiful ridges for this stuff, but I had to walk in a half a mile. Thank goodness I could take a road up to the top and walk reasonably level, but that, and then a half mile out again when you're done. But I did an awful lot of hawk trapping. I I never made it like, I never mixed falconry and banding. I didn't have to. I could go trap my own hawks for falconry. And on the banding operation, I put bands on them and send them down the ridge.
Yeah.
But I did that for many, many years. And that helps. That helps in a lot of ways developing your raptor skills.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, if you, it's just like you're talking about with the hoods and the equipment. I mean, you make 1,000 hoods, and eventually you're probably going to make a hood that you like. You know, I mean, that's just speculation because I don't ever plan on making one. But I mean, I'm sure if you trap enough birds and get to the point where you have enough practice with all the banding and all that stuff, then it probably becomes pretty easy to identify other places that you can go to trap your own birds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. It's just building up that knowledge base, and it's like a snowball going downhill. It just builds on itself. So
yeah.
And it was all a lot of fun. I enjoyed it immensely. It was a very personal thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought of falconry as a social sport. Never. And a lot of guys do. A lot of guys, go to all these meets, and if they go hawking, they got to have a guy or two go along with them. And so I was always a loner type. And when things went right or things went wrong, I had myself to thank for it. And, just always worked around any obstacles just by myself. So I didn't, I know there's been, the old hawking club and a lot of, organizations. Seems like every time enough falconers populate an area, they want to form a club. You probably haven't heard of any of the old, did you ever hear of the Kestrel Club?
No.
Yeah.
No.
You like Kestrels? There was a Kestrel Club in the 1950s. Yep. And a whole bunch of, little organizations like that, if they could muster enough people together. And when they started NAFA, that was just amazing, countrywide. Just amazing that there were enough falconers to instigate something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how, like, going from and kind of raising yourself up in this community when there were no rules and regs or clubs or anything, and like we kind of started off the conversation a little bit talking about, and just seeing the progression not only of how things have happened with the game populations, places to hunt, dwindling, and then also at the same time seeing all these clubs form, come and go, or grow, or change, or morph into other stuff, and then that gets bigger. And no, I mean, I can only imagine what things are like from someone like yourself, perspective, and seeing so many different things change and come and go over all these different decades. And I mean, what was it like though?
Well, I'll tell you, we didn't have apprentice falconer and general falconer and what are they called? Whatever the last is, the silly named one. I didn't have all that. We had the booby system.
Okay. All right.
And there were a few falconers with a small grapevine, that just barely kept in touch. And they were the people that newcomers gravitated to. And if the falconer, Corny McFadden was a great one. There were a bunch of them. But if someone approached them who looked like they might make a good falconer, they became that guy's booby.
Okay.
And it was an honor to be a booby. And you didn't you didn't take any chances with that status, because you had been accepted by an established falconer, and that's how I guess I know that didn't happen to me. But that was, I just did it on my own. But generally speaking, in the Northeast here, there was a booby system. And all the old guys, you look, I'm not going to name names because I don't want anybody.
Well, sure. Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah. But it's amazing who learned under who.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff. How Assotique, how the word got out on Assotique, things like that. This was all on the booby system, working or not working.
I just, who decided to name it the booby system? That's what I want to know.
I have no idea. Yeah. It was in place.
How long even before you got into it was that in place?
That was in place in the 1940s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, no, you're right though. It's interesting just seeing all the evolutionary changes and how all this stuff has happened. But yeah, I don't know. It's not something that I can put too much of a thought into. There's so many other things, modern things to deal with and worry about, when it comes to all this stuff. But I mean, kind of going back to though, when it was time, like what point did you realize that you were going to have to start taking a major step back, and what was it like for you kind of having to give a lot of things up once your knees and other things?
You mean the end of the career?
Yeah,
well, it's been really in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, if you can't follow them on a chase, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just can't do it. Car hawking doesn't cut it. You even need your knees for, well, let's call it window hawking. You even need your knees for that.
Yeah.
So I tried that with Merlins. I had Merlins for about 20-something years straight. Usually as a second bird to a peregrine or something. I had a wonderful time with Merlins, but still, even those, little birds, you're out there running around like a crazy man. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I had quit making equipment except for myself and a few friends that, needed some equipment. So that was going away. But the big thing was, after punishing my knees for 60 years, I just can't do it out in the field anymore.
Yeah.
And it hurts to think about it. A day does not go by that I don't wish I had a hawk.
Yeah.
Maybe a peregrine.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I was curious about it.
Yeah.
I mean, some guys, whenever they realize that they can't do it anymore. So there's a lot of guys that are fine with it. They're like, I've had a heck of a run. To be honest, I'm in the twilight and winding down on all this anyway. And it's like, how many more? I've heard some guys, it's like, well, how many more rabbits do I really need to take and, catch and whatever. I was just curious about that. Like, I didn't know if you wish you could still do it or if you're fine with it or whatever.
I really wish I could do it, but I'm practical enough to stop, when I should.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I essentially stopped cold turkey. I still have friends. I still read falconry books, and I still get the publications and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I just flat out quit.
Yeah.
And said it was a good run.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. It was just worked out great. I don't know. I don't even know where it came from, because nobody that I knew or any family member, no one had any interest even close to falconry. It just, got started with it and had a nice run.
Yeah, that sounds like, it was a heck of a run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Aside from the hood, of course, that you're going to make me after, it's all said and done too.
Yes.
Aside from that, I mean, it's, I'm glad that.
Oh, what size hood is that supposed to be?
We'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
No, we won't burden everybody else with the few hoods that you're going to make me after this.
We're up to a few now.
Just be glad if it doesn't get into the double digits after this conversation. So, but no, I mean, it sounds like you've had a great life and a great falconry career. And, you mentioned the archives too. I mean, I know that you probably, like you said, you mentioned, having some hoods and stuff in there, but I mean, have you had a chance to make it out to the archives at all recently, or
I came close in the late 90s.
Yeah.
My family and I was on a road trip. We were on a road trip. Mm-hmm. And we were going around to national parks. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the last stop was going to be Las Vegas, and the kids just kept saying, "When do we get to Las Vegas?" and I tried to go from Yellowstone to the archives. Mm-hmm. But by that time, I had forgotten just how big the West is.
Yeah.
That was a long haul, long ways out of the way, and we did not make it, and I kick myself for it, all the time. But I knew Kent Carney, mm-hmm. and I knew some of the fellows whose stuff is in the museum.
Yeah. Well, they're still doing cool stuff out there. Yeah, I was just out there in April for their latest spring rendezvous, and mm-hmm. that's when you should make a trip out there for the next spring rendezvous that they have every year.
That was a plan once too.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to do that. Who was I going to do that with? I can't quite remember. But it didn't materialize. And they have that memorial out there
mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
the Wall of Remembrance. Yeah,
nice to see. Yeah, nice to see who's on there.
Yeah,
because when you spend a lot of time in falconry in the Northeast U.S., you learn a lot of stuff about a lot of people. Mm-hmm. That's really where it all began.
Sure.
In fact, you could call Pennsylvania, Southeast Pennsylvania, the heart of it all. Mm-hmm. That whole thing with Washington D.C. and up into Northeast Jersey. That's where falconry got cranking.
Yeah, and like I said, I highly recommend if you can make it out there. I mean, it's a cool event, and lots of neat people that make it each year. And like I said, I'm just glad I got to go back in April, and I'm sure that for you and having things in there, and it would be kind of nice and nostalgic in a way to see a lot of those people mm-hmm. that'd be out there. But we could talk for hours more about some of the more specific aspects of your very long falconry career. But before we do start wrapping things up, I do want to get a one good hunting story from you, one more good either hunting story or some fun or even just learning experience that you had. Anything. I know that 60 years is a wide pool to kind of draw from with a lot of those things. But what's one of the more memorable experiences that you've had in falconry in all these years?
So many crazy things have happened. It's hard to narrow them down, but we got through them. But I'll tell you, I had a prairie falcon, and we were duck hunting. And this was one of those daisy clipper prairie falcons. This bird didn't know anything about clouds or open sky or anything. It stuck right close to the business at hand. Mm-hmm. And there was a 2-lane road there, which I was on one side, and the bird went to the other side of it. And the cars were clipping along pretty good on this 2-lane road. It wasn't an old country road. It was a hot 2-lane highway. This is years ago, maybe in the 60s. But darned if that prairie falcon didn't come back and drop down and cross that road just as a car was coming along.
Yeah.
And the car hit the hawk, the headlight on the car shattered onto the road. The Mohammedan bells on the hawk were smashed flat, and the hawk came in and just landed by me. Not bothered by it at all. I thought, there's a dead hawk. Knocked the headlight out of the... Those prairie falcons are tough.
There's a reason why they're often cemented with the reputation of just being like the most powerful sledgehammer type, like long wing. The peregrines are known for their finesse. The prairies are known just for their pure blunt force trauma. So, there's probably something to that. Yeah. Well, what else happened? Was there anything else significant that happened in that little? So nothing was wrong with the bird? Nothing at all?
And bird didn't know anything was wrong. The people just knew they didn't have a headlight anymore.
So I have to ask.
So we went on about our business.
Yeah. Well, did you kind of like dive behind a bush or something so they didn't see you?
Stood right there and watched the whole thing from about 20 feet away.
Yeah. Did you kind of wave them down and offer to pay for their headlight or?
Nope. They kept going. They couldn't believe what had happened.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. That was really a memorable time. I'll tell you another one. I think it was when I trapped my first peregrine in the 60s, early 60s, 63 or something like that. I was using a pigeon harness. And the funny thing is, I had never heard of a pigeon harness or a pigeon vest. As a matter of fact, the old guys, they didn't call it any of that. They called it a throw out because they didn't want anybody to know. You could take the nooses like you had on your Falconry, put them on a leather jacket for a pigeon and trap parrot. They didn't want people to know that. That was deep, deep secret. And so I didn't know about it, but I knew about Falconries, and I made my own. I said, why can't you just put these nooses on a pigeon? Which I did. I had a great design, a lot different than the old Assocation design, but a great design. And so I was trying to trap I think it was my first peregrine, and threw that pigeon out and had 7 peregrines come in to get my pigeon. This was when everybody was, Silent Spring and all that stuff was going on. And they not only, I believe they were all first-year birds, and they were trying to knock each other off the pigeon so they could get on it. So they had this little bar fight going on at the side of the road. People are driving by, didn't see a thing. You know how that is. And I'm waiting there, sweating bullets. And I did end up catching a bird out of that. But 7 peregrines after your pigeon at one time is a sight to behold. So...
Well, I thought you were going to come out and say something like, not only did you catch those 7, but then there was another, that came out of the woodwork and ended up catching, a golden eagle on top of it, whatever. And,
Well, I actually did see one peregrine and used my throw out. Mm-hmm. And then there was 7 birds out of nowhere. They saw the pigeon. I didn't see them. So that's how that went.
Well, how mad would you have been if all 7 of these birds came out of the woodwork and you wouldn't have caught any of them?
That has happened more often than I would like to admit. Mm-hmm. But trapping is a funny thing. It's a lot of fun. But there's an expertise to it. It's not just ABC. There's a lot more to it than that. And so you have to develop your trapping skills. Mm-hmm. This was early on, when a fellow who had trapped on Assocation showed me his pigeon harness. I said, well, that's nothing like mine.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I know we could keep going for a very long time on a lot of this stuff, but there's so many different avenues that we could probably go down a rabbit hole on. But before we do wrap things up, I do also want to get like one last, piece of advice from you. I mean, especially someone like yourself who's had so many experiences in the sport and seen things, from the infancy all the way to how things are now. I mean, what kind of piece of advice do you have for people that are either just now getting into the sport or been in it for a while?
I would remind them that this is a sport between a man and a hawk. It's not really a social sport. It can be made into one, but it's between a man and a hawk. And it's more important for you to think like the hawk than it is for the hawk to, know what's going on in your head. So that would be my advice: is keep it one-on-one and deal with, just the basic rudiments of falconry. They've never changed. They've been the same for hundreds of years. So that's what I say. Don't be caught up in all the extras, all the glitz that can come with it.
Right, because there's so much glitz, glamour, and and popularity and fame and fortune that can come out of falconry, right? Yeah.
In some people's minds.
yeah. I mean, some people, they're going to always be their own biggest celebrity, I guess. But well, that's great. Well, Gaylen, I really appreciate you coming out and hanging out today. And it's been cool. These are the kind of conversations that are always kind of neat to have whenever you meet someone like yourself for the first time. Have a conversation like this, and just, it kind of sucks that for the time that is available, you're only really able to touch kind of like the tip of the iceberg, with all the different experiences and wealth of knowledge that I know you probably have. I mean, you have to doing all the things that you've done, but anyway, I mean, it's been a real pleasure getting a chance to sit down and talk to you. And like I said, I appreciate you coming out and doing this. I hope it's been, fun for you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoyed it immensely. Yep.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad.
It's great. Glad I came.
Yeah. And, don't forget, we have the hood discussion to have.
Funny you brought that up again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a minor detail. We'll hash it out here in a minute. But yeah, and let me know if you ever do decide to to go out to the rendezvous. I mean, I'm kind of probably plan to make it either a annual or semi-annual thing. Heading
Wonderful.
out there and stuff too. I like seeing what they've been doing, and those guys out there, and John especially has been doing a great job in digitizing and making what they have there available for everyone, to see. So I think you'd be really impressed and would have a good time checking it out.
Yes.
Yeah, so, all right. Well, I guess Seth is supposed to have this amazing barbecue available soon. We're going to have to, get something to eat, and
I hope he gives me something to eat.
Have another beer. Well, it was, from what I heard, it was your fault last time that you just forgot to eat.
Oh, that's the way you heard it.
Well, that's you admitted to it later, but all right. Yeah. Well, we all aren't perfect, I guess. We're forgetful, but anyway. All right. But like I said, thank you again. And hopefully we'll do this again soon.